Today, many of us live in a man-made world with all its conveniences, opportunities, and demands. And after a while, we forget to notice the beauty and the power and the wonder of God's creation that surrounds us. Our world is filled with competing noises and activities, each one shouting for our attention. But slow down, refocus, and you'll be drawn to a harmony of voices that encircle the globe and gather from the farthest ends of the universe, proclaiming the glory of God, the designer and creator of everything we see and don't see. In Flight and Spike, the second of this three-part video series, you'll discover how God is making himself known in unmistakable ways through creation. So come on, let's join Dr. Job Martin and Dan the Animal Man on a spectacular journey from deep inside the earth to jungles and deserts and to the farthest reaches of space in Creation Proclaims Flight and Spike. The earth is teeming with life, the birds of the air, the creatures of the sea, and the incredible array of plants and animals on land. They live harmoniously in our wonderful biosphere we call home. We find no other place in the universe that can support such an abundance and diversity of living things. Why is our planet so perfectly suited for life? Let's join Dr. Jason Lisle, an astrophysicist with answers in Genesis, as he helps us understand why the earth is created for life.
Science confirms biblical creation, particularly as it pertains to the earth, for example. And of course, the Bible tells us that the earth is designed, God formed it to be inhabited in Isaiah 45:18. And so the earth is uniquely designed for life, and that's something that we see confirmed as we better and better understand science.
For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is none else.
One of the ways in which that's confirmed is the fact that the earth is just at the right distance from the sun to receive the proper amounts of heat and light, and that's not something that happened by chance. In fact, Isaac Newton said that very thing. A lot of people don't realize that Isaac Newton was a biblical creationist. He had tremendous respect for the Word of God. And so not only do we have the earth at the right distance, but the earth has an atmosphere that's just right in terms of life. It's designed to absorb harmful radiation from space, because there is harmful radiation in space, and so the earth has a magnetic field that deflects a lot of that. It's got an atmosphere that absorbs radiation frequencies that would be destructive to life, extreme ultraviolet and such. In fact, a lot of the ultraviolet is absorbed, not all of it, but a lot of it's absorbed by the atmosphere. It's interesting that the atmosphere actually has a transparency window just about that level of human vision. And so our eyes are tuned to the atmosphere, and the sun also has its peak wavelength at about the range at which human beings would be most sensitive to light. So it's designed for us to see and to observe into the universe, which I think is very interesting. My evolutionary colleagues might say, well, the eye evolved in response to the sun or the atmosphere. But you see, there are three things there that have to be working simultaneously together. And in any case, it's not just the Earth's atmosphere. The sun, the eyes, they all go together. And other planets don't have an atmosphere that's that way. So it seems that the Earth is actually uniquely designed in that respect. We have a planet that has abundant liquid water on its surface. Earth is more than 2/3 covered with liquid water, and that, as far as we know, liquid water is a requirement for life. Now, the water molecule is fairly abundant in space. We have H2O in the form of ice or water vapor. But liquid water is relatively rare in the universe, and in fact, Earth is the only place we know that has abundant liquid water. And so the fact that that's an ingredient for life seems to be a design feature of the Earth. The Earth also has abundant free oxygen in our atmosphere, and that's something that no other planet has, and that's necessary for us to breathe. Respiration requires that free oxygen. And so that's just one of many characteristics that the Earth has that makes it ideally designed for life to be possible. But you know, the interesting thing is evolutionists have their explanations for a lot of these things. They have what we might call rescuing devices, where they can propose a hypothesis that allows them to explain these lines of evidence in an evolutionary worldview. So do we have really a proof? Is there anything in science that would prove that biblical creation is true? And I would say yes, but it's a little bit different than what a lot of people think. I would say the scientific proof that creation is true is that if creation weren't true, you couldn't scientifically prove anything. Because you see, the nature of science is such that it requires certain things to be true even before we go out and observe the universe. For example, our senses would have to be basically reliable. Your eyes and your ears would have to be basically reliable for you to observe the results of your experiment. And we have to observe the results of an experiment, or we can't do science. You need that observation and experimentation. The universe would have to operate in a consistent and predictable fashion in order for the scientific method to work, because the scientific method involves repeated demonstration, repeated testability. That's one of the hallmarks, one of the trademarks of science, is this ability to verify something over and over again. Now, in a random chance universe, why would the universe obey consistent and predictable laws of nature? Why would that be the case if everything's just sort of chance? Why would it have this uniformity, this consistency to it? Why would it obey the same laws? Why would it obey laws at all? Why would they be the same in, for example, the Andromeda Galaxy as they are here on the Earth? And how could the human mind even understand them if the human mind's just a chemical accident? You see, science really makes sense in light of biblical creation because God made the universe. God upholds the universe in a consistent and logical fashion. He does so for our benefit, so that life is possible and so that we can understand how the universe operates. God has promised us, for example, that He will uphold the future as He has the past. In Genesis 8:22, God tells us the cycles of nature will be in the future as they have been in the past.
While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease.
Now that's something that I don't understand how that would be in a chance universe. How could you rely upon the future to be like the past? I mean, it might accidentally be the case, but we all rely upon that. We assume that's true when we do science, because we repeat that experiment in the future and we say, well, it'll have the same results as it did in the past. I mean, if you stub your toe, you say, well, I don't want to do that again. Well, why? Because you assume if you stub it again, it will hurt again. And that makes sense in a Christian universe where God upholds the future as He has the past. But why in an evolutionary universe with everything changing anyway, everything constantly changing, why would there be this uniformity in nature? I don't understand how evolutionists think that they can rely upon the methods of science. Now, an evolutionist might say, well, we know science works, or we expect it to work in the future because it has in the past. But you see, that's begging the very question that's being asked. Because I'm asking, why can you rely upon things in the future to be as they were in the past? And if he says, well, because in the past it's been that way, so I expect in the future it will be that way, he's begging the very question I'm asking. He's assuming the future will be like the past in order to prove that the future will be like the past. And that's not considered legitimate in terms of logical reasoning. But the creationist, the biblical creationist, has an independent reason. Even though we all rely upon past experience to make sense of the future, the biblical creationist says, well, that makes sense, because God upholds the future like He has the past. He's promised me that certain things are going to be in the future as they have been in the past. So that makes sense in biblical creation. Why would the universe obey laws of nature in a chance universe? Why would it obey these nice, neat little equations like E equals mc squared and F equals ma? That's pretty convenient, isn't it? Well, that makes sense in a biblical creation universe where God made our minds, He made the universe, and He upholds the universe in a way that is consistent, that the human mind can understand. And so, of course, it obeys mathematical equations. God's mind is mathematical. To think mathematically is to think in a way that's consistent with the nature of God. And we, as image bearers of God, being created in His image, we have the ability to think in a way that's consistent with God. We can't think exactly like God because He's infinite. But we nonetheless can think logically, we can think mathematically, because that's a reflection of the way God thinks about things. And the universe obeys logical, mathematical laws of nature because it's upheld by the mind of God. So science ultimately only makes sense in a biblical creation worldview. And not only do we have laws of nature and laws of logic, we also have laws of morality. And I would argue that laws of morality only make sense in a biblical creation universe. If everything's just random chance, why should we have a code of behavior that we ought to obey? Where does the ought come from? I mean, there just is in an evolutionary universe. Things just are the way that they are. Why should we behave in a particular fashion? Now, some people have said, oh, well, whatever the majority of people think, that's how we ought to behave. And my question would be, why? Why should I behave just in a particular way just because the majority of people think so? Just because the majority of people have an opinion on something doesn't make it true. After all, if the majority of people thought that the world was flat, that wouldn't make it so. So why should I behave in that fashion? And in fact, I was talking with a guy the other day who was in my office. He's a skeptic of Christianity. He was asking me some questions about the Bible, and I said, well, morality only makes sense in light of a biblical worldview. And he said, no, good is what is determined by the majority of people. And I said, well, if I could convince the majority of people that it's okay to kill you, would that make it right? And the interesting thing, first he said, yes, that's right. And I said, really? It would be good to kill you just because the majority of people say so? And then he thought about it. He said, well, no, I guess that wouldn't be right. It might be legal. We might be able to make a law, but it's not good. And that makes sense, you see, only in a Christian worldview, where there's a God who is sovereign over all people and therefore has the right to make the rules for us, and we're responsible to that God for our actions. And so you see, morality really goes back to biblical creation, but it doesn't make sense in an evolutionary universe. Basically, all the things that we take for granted when we do science, when we do mathematics, when we reason, when we have rationality, when we say we ought to obey certain rules, all of those things only make sense in a biblical creation worldview. And I think that's a wonderful proof of biblical creation. The fact that if it weren't true, you couldn't prove that anything is true, because you wouldn't have laws of logic by which you go about proving other things. You wouldn't have the reliability of science, because there wouldn't be any reason to expect any uniformity in nature. And so all of these things, the fact that I'm even able to speak in this fashion is actually a proof of biblical creation.
The Bible tells us over and over that creation comes together in a harmony of voices that encircle the globe and gather from the farthest ends of the universe, proclaiming the glory of God, the designer and creator of everything we see and don't see. I will praise thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will show forth all thy marvelous works.